we'll explain the principles that will govern the employment of our troops. Before discussing the warriors and their weapons, it would be useful to examine the geography of Oka and Kanawaki. Oka is a small town on the north shore of the Ottawa River, a short distance from Montreal. The area that includes the native community at Oka measures approximately 6 kilometers by 7 kilometers and is adjacent to the town of Oka. The main barricade that most Canadians have seen on the news is located on the main road that leads through Oka. The Kanawaki Reserve is situated on the south shore of the St. Lawrence River and is just across the Mercier Bridge from the island of Montreal. The reserve covers an area about 8 kilometers by 12 kilometers. Most of its northern land limit is the St. Lawrence Seaway Canal, which allows ships to travel up the river to the Great Lakes. It shares its southwestern boundary with the city of Chateauguay, a city of some 40,000 people. All access roads leading to the Mercier Bridge, as well as 2 rail lines leading to a parallel railroad bridge, cross the reserve. Many portions of both the Oka and Kanawaki areas are heavily wooded. This has allowed warriors to enter and leave both areas on foot at night fairly easily. They have done this since the start of the crisis. Let's briefly review the major events leading up to the current situation. On the 11th of March, barricades were erected at Oka. 4 months later, on the 11th of July, an unsuccessful attempt was made by the Sûreté du Québec to remove the Oka barricade. And on the same day, a barricade was built on the Mercier Bridge. On the 6th of August, Quebec Premier Robert Bourassa requested that the Canadian forces be deployed in aid of the civil power. 2 weeks later, on the 20th of August, the soldiers replaced the Quebec Provincial Police at all the barricades in both the Oka and Kanawaki areas. Although this situation began with just one barricade at Oka, which was followed by the one on the Mercier Bridge, the warriors have improved these positions and built many more. They continued to do so even while negotiations were underway. We now know much more about just what exists behind the barricades. At Oka, much work has gone into preparing the area for action since the beginning of this crisis. This aerial photo shows the kind of preparations that have been made. Dirt has been piled up in order to deny use of the roads. New barricades have been erected and large ditches and trenches have been dug. These trenches are laid out in a paramilitary fashion. Similar but much more extensive work has gone on at Kanawaki. You will again find trenches and barricades along with many obstacles meant to deny easy movement up the roads that pass through the reserve. Rail lines have been blocked and destroyed. There are several bunker-like installations. The warriors have also built an extensive anti-tank ditch, as this diagram illustrates. The original barricade on the Mercier Bridge is no longer alone. Another has been built further out on the bridge. The warriors have in the past declared their intention to destroy the bridge should they be attacked. Although the installations identified may seem rather simple, it must be understood that sandbags, concrete trenches, and bunkers used by the warriors have tremendous stopping power. This means that even heavy weapons might have difficulty penetrating them. The barricades that Canadians have seen on television are solid obstacles, and they have been improved over the past weeks. As we examined the photos of Oka and Kanawaki, it was evident that the warrior positions in fact constitute military strongpoints. For example, each barricade is manned by 20 to 50 warriors on a 4-hour shift rotation. Barricade positions around the perimeters have been improved. This was done by building obstacles on all the major routes. Trench networks on either side of these obstacles will allow the warriors to fire at persons making their way through them. In Kanawaki, warriors have built a series of these positions from the perimeter of the reserve back to the town of Kanawaki. This could allow them to fight a series of battles while moving back to the town. Unfortunately, we cannot be certain that we know about all the trenches, bunkers, anti-tank ditches, and other obstacles. Nor can we be certain that there are no landmines at the barricades or between the many positions that have been built. There may well be much more that remains undetected. Unless the warriors are willing to cooperate in ending this crisis, removing the barricades peacefully will be an impossible task. Removing them by force will be costly. The warriors themselves are known to have various degrees of military and paramilitary training. We know that some of them are former members of the Canadian or American forces and that they have combat fighting skills. Some served in Vietnam. Those veterans have instructed other warriors who have not had formal military training. The Oka and Kanawaki areas are large, heavily wooded, and as we stated earlier, it is quite easy to get into these places. It is therefore possible that many warriors could be present without our knowledge. By basing our calculations on the number of warriors and armed sympathizers that can be seen at each barricade and the frequency of their shift changes, we have concluded that there are at least 200 armed persons at Oka and Kanawaki. The warriors have effective means of communicating, and they have fully developed battle positions. Under the present circumstances, even just a handful of combat-ready warriors would pose a difficult challenge to Canadian soldiers if the operation does not proceed peacefully. This is why we must proceed with a large number of troops. Our troops will confront warriors that have a sizable and effective arsenal. Media coverage of the warriors has shown that they have a large number of modern weapons. Apart from shotguns and pistols, they have hunting rifles, FN/FAL semi-automatic rifles, AK-47 automatic assault rifles, Uzi submachine guns, M16 rifles similar to those used by NATO troops, Ruger Mini-14 rifles, RPK-74 light machine guns, heavy 50 caliber Barrett sniping rifles, and fragmentation grenades, booby traps, and Molotov cocktails. Some of these weapons, such as the AK-47 and the RPK-74, can fire between 500 and 600 rounds per minute, out to an effective range of 300 to 500 meters. They can penetrate the side of armored personnel carriers or destroy brick walls. In addition to these weapons, we know that the warriors have quantities of dynamite. We also know that the warriors have prepared many booby traps. This creates a dangerous situation, not only for the soldiers, but especially for the residents of Oka and Kanawaki. It could take many months to find and remove these booby traps. The warriors are also suspected of having a number of other types of weapons, including one or more M60 machine guns, which fire 550 rounds per minute out to a range of 1,800 meters, an RPG-7 anti-tank weapon, and one or more 50 caliber heavy machine guns, whose bullets will go through even the frontal armor of our armored personnel carriers. They may also have one or more M72 light anti-armor weapons. This rocket launcher can destroy armored personnel carriers. And lastly, we suspect that they may have landmines, plastic explosives, and a mortar. This is a dangerous situation. Military strong points occupied by men armed with automatic and heavy military weapons exist in 2 locations in the Montreal area. This represents a very real and serious danger. This is why the Canadian forces have approached the situation with such prudence. We have assessed the number of warriors involved, their military and paramilitary training, their considerable arsenal, and the potential of their strong points. It is our military assessment that it could well take all the military resources of a brigade to accomplish the tasks we've been instructed to carry out by the government of Quebec. The Army formation that has been assigned this task is the 5e Brigade Mécanisée du Canada, or 5 Brigade. We hope that there will be no violence, and we will organize our operations to minimize the risk of conflict. But we cannot take chances and must deploy sufficient numbers of troops and equipment. We hope for the best, but plan for the worst. The determination as to whether there will be violence is entirely in the hands of the warriors. Because the perimeter around both areas is so easy to cross, we cannot be sure of the exact number of warriors that we will face. But if a large number of warriors are committed to offering armed resistance, casualties on both sides will inevitably be heavy. The commander of 5 Brigade is Brigadier General Armand Roy. General Roy has some 3,033 troops available for this task. Of this number,
You have been watching a videotape provided by the National Defense Department. Once again, the Army announcing that military operations will cease only when the warriors lay down their weapons and surrender without condition. We will have more news at 11.